And viewers, Russia has reiterated its commitment to nuclear arms control, with Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, I beg your pardon, saying that Moscow's proposals on the New START treaty are aimed at preventing negative global scenarios. President Vladimir Putin has offered to voluntarily maintain the limits on the United States and Russia's nuclear arsenals set under the 2010 Accords, which is due to expire in February, on the condition that Washington does the same. Ryabkov has also stated that despite signals from the United States about improving ties with Russia, Ukraine continues to receive American-made weapons and intelligence support. Listen in to what he had to say first.
Взаимоотношения наши с США все еще находятся на ранних стадиях процесса нормализации, и общий успех данного процесса не гарантирован. В совокупности можно сказать, что завершение жизненного цикла ДСНВ предрешено, и это произойдет в феврале 2026 года в полном соответствии с заложенными в соглашении временными рамками.
And Raymond Vickery, who is an international affairs expert and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. I extend you a very warm welcome and thank you for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, Russia is maintaining that the normalization of ties between U.S. and Russia are still in a very nascent stage. Now, apart from the sanctions threats that is looming large, what are the other sticking points, if you could explain that to our viewers?
Thanks very much for having me. Waging peace, like waging war, requires a strategy and it requires partners. At this point, unfortunately, the Trump administration does not have an overall strategy in dealing with Russia, nor has it had a partnership with other great democracies like India, like those in Western Europe and Japan. Instead, the approach has been a sort of real estate development, one-on-one, making a deal, and then having that transaction show our president as having won. This is completely inadequate in regard to what is a very, very important structural problem for the relationship between the United States and Russia. Ukraine has to be resolved. It's really impossible to make progress on other points in regard to security and trade without resolving what has been the worst transgression of the principles of the UN Charter, which has occurred since World War II. And so that resolution must take place. And at this point, the negotiation has been largely between Ukraine and U.S., and not with Russia. Now, Mr. Ambassador Witkoff is going to go to Russia, but if you look at the reality on the ground, as President Macron has said from France, the reality is that the Russians have rejected the proposals with fire and bombing, as opposed to any kind of amelioration or stepping back from hostilities. So this is a very difficult situation. The Russian say it's very, very complex. It's not really so complex. What's required is for Russia to live up to the 1994 Budapest Agreement, in which they guaranteed the independence and security of Ukraine in return for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons. So I'm not sure that we are have made progress because we have neither the strategy nor the partnerships necessary to bring pressure on Putin and Russia to resolve the matter.
All right. So I will bring that Ukraine question later on into the discussion, but for now I want to bring in the New START treaty. Now, with the US-Russia nuclear treaty set to expire in February next year, what's the future likely to be?
Well, this is, of course, the existential question. All of the good which has been done in the past 80 years could be undone in an afternoon if there were to be an exchange of nuclear weapons. So this is really the crucial matter, and once again, President Trump seems to want to come out as some sort of personal winner in this, threatening to resume, in fact, ordering resumption of nuclear testing. I believe that there is enough sanity on both sides in regard to Russia and the United States to realize that this is not the way forward. President Trump follows the art of the deal, taking an extreme position in hopes that the other side will fold and that he will somehow come out in a triumphant position. This question of nuclear armaments and a moratorium on testing is not a matter for individual triumphant posturing. What it needs is extension of the kind of agreements which you've had with START and others since World War II. I believe that in spite of what's going on in Ukraine, that we will be able to at least have an extension of the status quo. If not, that's a very, very serious situation. And I would say that other nuclear powers, such as India, need to step forward and put pressure on both of these parties to prevent the nuclear disaster which would occur from further testing, much less a war.
Well, absolutely. Requested to stay on, Mr. Vickery, as we want to give our viewers some more information on Ryabkov's likely visit to Moscow. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was speaking during a state visit to Kyrgyzstan on Wednesday, said he believes that the United States understands the complexities involved in reaching a peace settlement in Ukraine. Now, this comes ahead of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's planned visit to Moscow next week, where he and other senior U.S. officials will discuss a possible peace plan with Russian officials. Now, the plan that's backed by U.S. President Donald Trump has sparked concerns in Ukraine and Europe, as it appears to heavily favor Russian demands, including limiting Ukraine's NATO ambitions and enshrining Moscow's control over a large portion of Ukrainian territory. Despite the concerns, Ukrainian President Zelensky has expressed willingness to advance the peace framework and discuss it further with Trump, including involving European allies in the talks. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov warned that the peace process remains delicate and uncertain. First, listen in to what President Putin had to say.
А я с удовольствием проинформирую вас о том, что у нас происходит на направлении достижений приемлемых для нас результатов, искомых для нас результатов мирными средствами на украинском направлении. Я знаю, что вы всегда в курсе, вас всегда это тоже беспокоит, и вы тоже один из тех людей, которые стремится к тому, чтобы этот.
All right, let's bring back Mr. Vickery into the discussions here. Mr. Vickery, first of all, thank you for staying on with us. And now, what impact or what's the likely outcome that we can expect from the U.S. ambassador's visit to Moscow next week, especially given the fact that we do know that back channel talks were held in Abu Dhabi just a few days ago?
Well, one wishes Ambassador Witkoff well. It is, of course, much better to talk than to be involved in the kind of violence which has taken the lives of so many people on both sides. That having been said, it does not seem to me that it is likely that Putin is going to change his mindset. And his mindset is a throwback to the era of empire. He has said many times that he thinks that the worst geopolitical disaster of all times was the demise of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was nothing in geopolitical terms but a communist takeover of the Russian Empire. And so what he has in mind is that Russian greatness and his greatness is determined by whether or not he can establish the empire. Unfortunately, Russian troops have made very small advances in Ukraine during 2025. This has encouraged him in his belief that this empire building can go forward on his terms. So the likelihood that he is going to fold and say to Witkoff, yes, we accept the slimmed down 28-point proposal, which now does not give the concessions of territory, nor does it give the kind of guarantees against NATO being a protector of Ukraine. The chances that this is going to work are very slim. As I say, all peace-loving people must encourage this and hope that it works. And one hopes that the President of the United States will understand that he has to bring in a legitimate and respectful way other great democracies like India, like in Western Europe, like in Japan, to provide the kind of coalition that will see that Moscow's interest in the long run are in peace and prosperity rather than empire building.
All right. Mr. Vikri, one last question to you before I let you go. Now, how is Ukraine to see Putin's statement that Trump does understand the complexity of the Ukraine war, and especially with the Witkoff's visit, will Ukraine really be left in muddy waters?
Well, you know, this statement that President Trump understands the complexity simply, it seems to me, is a reference to the fact that he's willing to give up portions of Ukrainian territory, that he is willing to make concessions in order to placate a person and a nation which really have been his friends in the past. One would hope that he would not fall victim to this view of supposed complexity, but get back to basics. And the basics are the values enshrined in the United Nations Charter against invasion of your neighbors and respect for independence of sovereign nations. That's the basic principle. This whole situation was not brought about by complexity. It was brought about by invasion and territorial aggrandizement. And so, yes, Trump understands real estate kinds of transactions in which you get something and you give up very little, and therefore you have won. But that's not the kind of understanding which is going to further this peace process.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vikri, for giving us your time here at NewsX World, and we appreciate you sharing your perspectives. And with that, viewers, let's move on to another important development